Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for AAIC 22 Live. We are at the Alzheimer's Association's International Conference in San Diego and being held virtually. This week, we had more than 10,000 participants representing 98 countries, both here and online. We've had 4,000 pieces of research presented. And so to help us understand some of this research that's come out, just a couple of the highlights, we won't go through all 4,000, is Dr. Heather Snyder, Vice President of Scientific Relations at the Alzheimer's Association. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no, absolutely happy to be here. And I do think that 10,000, nearly 100 countries is really representative of Alzheimer's and other dementia. This is a global issue, and the global research community is coming together and working together in ways to try to understand risk, early detection, and how can we intervene, treat, and ultimately prevent.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I want to start with what I think is probably the one that's grabbing the most headlines. Stephen Colbert was talking about it last night. He's not too happy with some of this research, and that was about ultra-processed foods and the impact that it might have on cognition. So can you help us understand a little bit about what type of foods we, I guess, have to start avoiding?
Well, it's not, it's really in a large population of people where they reported how their diet was. So how much of their diet or their daily calories were from what we would call ultra-processed foods. So these are foods that tend to be the higher in fats and sugars, so like French fries, chips, sodas, those types of foods. And individuals that had greater than 20% of their daily intake, they were at greater risk in later life of having cognitive decline. So what this is really a piece of that bigger puzzle of what might be contributing to a person's risk throughout their entire life. So when we think about our diet, what are the types of foods that we are eating every day, really making sure that we're getting a balanced diet, things that are heavier in vegetables, lower saturated fats, those types of things. It's good for your heart, and it turns out increasingly we're seeing that it's good for your brain.
So while we're talking about lifestyle and those choices that we can make that might be helpful for us, there was some really exciting research coming out about exercise. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I would underscore is it's also about having the opportunity to participate in whether it be diet or exercise as well. And one of the studies that we saw here is, it's called the Exert trial, and it was over a 12-month period, exercise interventions in individuals that had mild cognitive impairment. So that's that early memory changes that we see in Alzheimer's and other dementias that may make them at greater risk for having the greater memory changes that we see in those as those diseases progress. And what they saw is that individuals in either of the interventions, whether it be aerobic or stretch, the stretching interventions, they actually saw that they did not decline during the time period of the intervention. And when they compared it to a group of individuals that had been followed in another study, so that were part of another group, but very similar in characteristics, those individuals did decline in that same period. So it does really, I think, add to that research that tells us that being physically active, being engaged in exercise, that has benefits, again, for our overall health, but also for our brain.
So a lot of lifestyle changes or decisions, like you said, that we can be making, that might be helpful. Another study that I heard from a lot of my friends back home, they saw some headlines, they were a little worried, is about hypertension and pregnancy. So can you talk to us a little bit about what that study found?
Yeah, so some individuals, when they're pregnant, they may experience these increased blood pressure or high blood pressure changes during pregnancy. So I think some of us may be aware of like preeclampsia and some of those types of things. And this was in a large study of over 60,000 women. And what they showed is that those individuals that had that experienced those high blood pressure changes during pregnancy, they were at an increased risk in later life for vascular dementia, another type of dementia that leads to those changes in memory, thinking, and reasoning. But again, I'd add it to that bigger puzzle when we think about risk, when we think about all of the things that are contributing to our risk throughout our entire life. So whether we're talking about it's the foods we eat, it's how we're engaging in physical activity or how active we are, whether it is hormonal changes or lifestyle change or things like pregnancy, high blood pressure during pregnancy, but it's really throughout our entire life that may ultimately be what is associated to our risk.
One of the questions that we got from someone on our feed was about some research talking about Down syndrome. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is that intersection of Down syndrome and Alzheimer's disease. And so individuals with Down syndrome have triplication of the 21st chromosome. And in the 21st chromosome, there's a gene known as APP, or amyloid precursor protein. And so from very young ages, they see an increase in production of beta amyloid. And there's been a number of studies that have looked and seen that increase in production. And increasingly, we're seeing individuals with Down syndrome are developing the brain changes that we've seen in Alzheimer's. Because of some of the increased funding that we've seen at the federal level, there's actually a large ongoing study here in the United States, but also globally, that's looking at what are those brain changes that are happening throughout life, when are they happening, and what is the relationship to what we're seeing in people with Down syndrome that we see in people with late onset. So we saw a number of sessions on some of that science and where our understanding is moving, but also we're seeing, I think there was some discussion of several clinical trials that are starting, or at least one clinical trial that is starting in individuals with Down syndrome.
So a lot of really interesting research coming out this week, but I can't let you go without talking about the question that everybody asks me. I'm sure you get it a lot too, which is where are we with treatment?
I think one of the things that we've really seen is that incredible increase in diversification of what's moving into the clinical trials pipeline. So today we do have the first FDA approved drug that's really targeting the underlying biology, but in the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to see 3 or 4 late stage studies reporting out. In our field, we've never seen that before, and that's exciting. And so we're really looking forward to seeing those report outs in the very near future. But of course, that's really only one part of the story. That this morning, in fact, there was an incredible panel of a number of different alternative ways, or thinking about the complexity of the disease and how can we target the immune system or changes in the immune system, metabolism, some of the ways that our brain is making energy or producing energy. And really, it's that idea. This is a complex disease, and it's going to require a multi-component or a combination approach in how we think about treating it, whether it be with drugs, lifestyle or risk reduction strategies, and really putting that together, very much like how we do for cardiovascular disease.
And I think that combination and the wide variety was really on display this week. Again, that
Absolutely.
we've just talked about a little bit, but 4,000 different studies has just been, it's been an inspiring and incredible week. I think I've felt the researchers' excitement, and it seems like it's a really good time right now for Alzheimer's research.
There's a momentum, I think, in terms of when we have the increased funding at the federal level, the Alzheimer's Association's funding, and continuing to grow our own funding as well in advancing research. It's building this momentum, but it's the global community coming together in places like AAIC, sharing that science that's really bridging and accelerating those collaborations that are going to move us to where we ultimately need to be.
Well, I am very appreciative of your time. We don't want to keep you from any more of those great scientific sessions that are going on right now. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And this concludes AAIC 22 Live.